got Aiden Park. He was fun to interview.
He is a very interesting person
Yeah.
and very funny guy.
Yeah, I love his infectious laugh. Facebook. Look who we have here today. Again, special every single Tuesday at noon, high noon, 420 high noon. We have the 420 comic, the 420 comic. Jeffrey Peterson's over there in that other circle, other square. I don't know shapes. Let me read you his bio, his intro. Jeffrey Peterson, the 420 comic, has been the 420 comic for 18 years and counting. He has worked with Cheech and Chong both at the same time, which is very, very rare. Willie Nelson, Joe Rogan, and many cannabis icons. And he was the season one winner of the marijuana show. He's the 420 comic on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And he's also found on Facebook and Instagram as the Cali Chronic Comics with an X. Cali Chronic Comics with an X for merch that's 420 related. Dope stuff. Really cool stuff. Welcome to Comic Spot again. Every Tuesday, high noon. Jeffrey Peterson. Yay!
Hey, Linda, great to see you.
Great to see you again today.
Great to see you again today. I'm very excited. I love talking about sitcoms. This is a good medium for me to talk about really whatever I want to. So thank you for that opportunity to be here every Tuesday and do that.
Thank you.
And last night we got to hang out and you watch. I made you watch some Third Rock from the Sun with me. That was kind of fun.
Yes, that was so fun. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, and you made some wonderful spaghetti. Thank you. So you have I know you got an abridged show today. I don't want to take up too much time. I'll get right to my points. I love to talk about sitcoms. Last week we were talking about off the wall sitcoms, and I failed to mention one of the biggest ones of all that I have to mention real quick. Bewitched was just huge. You right? Didn't you love Bewitched?
I love Bewitched. I'm like
Samantha.
Gladys Kravitz.
Oh, you're like Gladys, Mrs. Kravitz across the street. That the biggest busybody. She was the original Karen, right? She was the original Karen. But you gotta love Bewitched, Uncle Arthur and Dr. Bombay and her mom. Just such great characters. And that show became had a spinoff that became Tabitha, which was its own show. So very interesting.
So today you researched a topic that I like to tiptoe around, and you don't.
I don't tiptoe around it because I love it, and it's like there's no time. This is more than ever. We should just embrace everybody's culture instead of tiptoeing around it, trying to find out what the right name is to call each other and stuff. How about just loving each other and finding out what we like about each other instead of what we don't like about each other. And for me, as you know, I've talked about it on this show before. I was raised in the hood in Los Angeles, and when I mean the hood, it was an all-black neighborhood in West LA in the 70s by lesbians. So it was definitely a unique experience. But most of my influences were very African American. My favorite TV show was Fat Albert, and that wasn't just because my family worked on it, which was true. I loved the show, and it reflected my neighborhood. As a sitcom fanatic, I love sitcoms, and there is a genre. If you look up in Wikipedia, it's true. You could even do that while we're doing the show, just for your edification. The term is called Black sitcom, and that is a sitcom, an American culture term that means a sitcom that either has a predominantly African American cast or an all African American cast. And very rarely do they have an all African American cast, but sometimes they do. but it doesn't matter to me. Funny is funny, and I love the genre of sitcom. It's just, to me, it's an art form. So I'm going to rail off for the purposes of time. And I want you to give me a 5-minute heads up here today.
Okay, will do.
Okay. But I love, and so many, as we've discussed, so many great stand-up comedians become the stars of these sitcoms. So I'll be mentioning some great, famous, legendary stand-up comedians that are African American that had their own show or was the star in one way or another of a show.
Okay.
But here's a bunch of them that I love. Tracy Morgan had a great show. Bernie Mac, the Bernie Mac show was great. Steve Harvey ended up having a show. The Hugleys, D.L. Hughley had his own show. Malcolm and Eddie, Eddie Griffin's show with Malcolm Jamal Warner. The Wayans brothers, you got to love those guys. There was even Gregory Hines, the great actor, dancer. He had his own show. Ellen Cleghorn from Saturday Night Live had her own show. Thea, the stand-up comedian Thea, Give Me a Break. That was a huge show. My God, Martin Lawrence had The Big House. LL Cool J had In the House. There was the Parkers, Moesha, Living Single. So many. I'm going to forget a million of them, but Eve was a show. Richard Pryor. No, that wasn't a sitcom. So that fell into my category of the sketch comedy shows. But it would have been neat if he had a sitcom. Family Matters was a sitcom that was a spinoff of whatchamacallit. I'll remember it in a second. Brain overload.
Up on the east side. Up on the east. Moving on.
Well, I'm gonna be mentioning that in my top 10. Don't forget I got a top 10. But I just wanted to mention all these shows that are not in my top 10. The Parenthood, that was Robert Townsend's big show. So there's been tons of great sitcoms. Of course, the biggies like the Cosby Show, and Bill Cosby had a show even before that called The Bill Cosby Show. And then, of course, Good Times. I always thought it was weird on Good Times. There was not a lot of good times on Good Times.
That's funny.
But see, my brain goes back around. Family Matters was a spinoff of Perfect Strangers. So there's all these spinoffs of each other and stuff. So in the understanding that time is of the essence here, because you've got so many you're doing 8 interviews today, right? 9. My gosh, you are a juggernaut. Oh, and so of course, one of the top shows to mention before I get to my top 10, Blackish became such a huge hit. Blackish, very funny show. You got Lawrence Fishburne, again, one of the greats. I met Lawrence Fishburne at George Lopez's party, and I called him the Silver Surfer. And I said, how many people have called you the Silver Surfer? And he said, you're the first one. Because I'm a huge fan of the Fantastic Four. And then, of course, one of the guys that gave me my biggest breaks in showbiz, one of the guys that let me open for him all weekend, the great Mark Curry. Mark Curry, great stand-up comedian. His show, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, that was a huge hit. So I do love Mark Curry. Great guy, gave me one of my big breaks. So my top 10. Oh, my gosh, my top 10. Now, these aren't going to be everybody's top 10, but yep. I love the genre of black sitcoms. I watch them all the time still. And to me, I don't put them in any separate category. I just love sitcoms. But if we were going to put them in a subgenre, that's perfectly fine. And I think, I could be a great programming director for BET because I know a lot of these great shows that maybe even some of the African-American culture may have overlooked. They may have not seen them. But number 10 on my list was a great show called That's My Mama. That's My Mama. Oh, such a great show. One of the best. and you got it. It had Ted Lang from The Love Boat, Isaac, your bartender. He played Junior on it. So funny. It's about a barber who lives in Washington, D.C. With his mom, and it's a great show called That's My Mama. I got it on DVD over here, and I love it. It's a great find. There's another show that was in the 90s that I really liked. I was on for a short time, called Between Brothers, and you can find that on cable somewhere. But Between Brothers was a great ensemble cast. Tommy Davidson being in the cast and stuff, and Kadeem Hardison was the lead. Great show, guys. Go check that out. Between Brothers. One of my favorite shows on Fox that was an animated. It's animated, but it is still a sitcom. Would be the PJs, the Projects. You ever seen the PJs?
Never.
Eddie Murphy. It's claymation. It's stop motion animation. Very funny. It was on Fox. It's about Thurgood, a guy named Thurgood, who is voiced by Eddie Murphy. So great ensemble cast in there. But Eddie Murphy is fantastic in it. Ron Howard is executive producer and stuff. The crazy thing is, it went, I believe, 3 seasons. In the 3rd season, they tried to trick us, and I turned it on one time, and Thurgood wasn't Eddie Murphy. It was a guy trying to sound like Eddie Murphy, but it wasn't Eddie Murphy. And I was like, that's not Eddie Murphy. So don't trick us. Yeah. So if you watch the show, you'll see. So number 7, moving on. One of my favorite shows. It's just everybody loves this show. Martin was such a huge hit. Martin Lawrence. I mean, what a huge hit. Shanae and the characters that he had, Brumman and Stan and just everybody. Sean, BDB, just everybody. That I loved that show. I was a huge fan of that show.
Me too.
So I loved Martin. I would watch it religiously. I talked about weird shows last time, and this goes on the list. Even though it wasn't a huge hit, it is such a good show, and I ended up finding like 5 episodes on YouTube. Homeboys in Outer Space is so funny. It's just ridiculous. It's two guys. It's two guys in the 90s that decide they're gonna, build a spaceship and go out in outer space, and then they're two the African American guys that are cool. That one's kind of a nerd and the other one's a cool guy, and they're out in outer space. So,
okay.
Homeboys in Outer Space. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
So going down to my top 5, folks, my top 5. And I highly recommend, check these shows out. Give them, if you've not seen these shows and you've just heard about them or you've never heard about them like you, That's My Mama, please check them out and you'll see why they're such good shows. And right behind you is another great show I didn't mention. Sinbad had his own show. Sinbad, very funny show. It was very rare. Arsenio had a tiny show that barely. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Speaking of those kind of people, stand-up comedians, 5 minutes, okay, perfect. Whoopi had a show I really loved. Whoopi's show is really probably one of the best things she's ever done is her sitcom. So if you ever get a chance to check out Whoopi, it's her at her best. She's very liberal and very irreverent in it. Number 4, you mentioned it. Moving on up to the east side, the Jeffersons. Come on, come on, George Jefferson. What a nut! I mean, and all the characters around him. Mr. Bentley used to walk on Mr. Bentley's back, and Tom Wilson, the white guy he used to mess with. Just so funny. And Florence, just what a great show. Number 3. You can find it. Very rare to find it, but I loved this show. Damon Wilson from Sanford and Son and Ron Glass from Barney Miller are the new Odd Couple. They're an African-American version of the Odd Couple. Perfect casting. They're so funny together. It works seamlessly. It's just such a great show. It's as good as the original. It's one of my favorite shows. course, number 2, Sanford and Son. I mean, Elizabeth. Oh God, I'm coming, Elizabeth. You can't beat that. Red Fox was so funny in that, and all the other characters around him. Dummy, hey dummy. Aunt Esther. You old fish-eyed fool. I mean, just a great show. Sanford and Son, of course, became Sanford, and then that became Sanford Arms. And then that became Grady. They just milked that cow as long as they could. So here we go. I probably got like a minute or 2 minutes, but here's my number 1 favorite show. And I've mentioned to you that I've made it a point to become friends with some of these sitcom stars. I mean, I really have. This person I have known since 1989. I still keep in contact with him.
I know who it is.
He's somebody I really look up to. His name is Ernest Thomas. He's Raj from What's Happening. That's who it is. It's Raj from What's Happening. He was what a brilliant TV show. What's Happening was a gigantic sensation, but Ernest Thomas, is just really one of the nicest and coolest people you could ever meet. A brilliant actor. He was in Roots. He was in Malcolm X, Cooley High. You've seen him in great stuff. But What's Happening, he will always be Raj to people. And he came and saw me once at the Comedy Store, and he's in the audience. Ha ha! His laugh is unmistakable. And people were like, "Is that Raj?" They couldn't believe that was Raj. But that show, and you can watch this on Hulu. What's Happening is one of the best, with Rerun, of course, and Dwayne, hey, and Big Shirley and all that. But that also spawned What's Happening Now. They took a break, and then they got older, and then Raj got married, and they came back with What's Happening Now. Both really good shows. So my favorite line ever from What's Happening was when they were with the Doobie Brothers that were on there, and they got coaxed into trying to pirate some music. And then Rod says to the Doobie Brothers, "Which Doobie you be?" So what a great time I've had today. If you guys,
thank you so much.
I think you did look up that it is called Black Sitcom and Wikipedia. So it's not a derogatory term. That's what it's called. But as you could tell, clearly I love the genre of African American television and sitcoms. So thank you to all the people that made these great shows. You guys are great. Here's my new comic book, which is I'm sponsoring your show with. So you've got a bunch of copies now, and this is my new one. Next week, you've inspired me. You mentioned that maybe I should talk about my comic books and what inspires them to be made and the humor that goes in them. So I'm going to actually be doing that next week. I'll be talking about my comic books and, what the humor I put in them. So we'll talk then, folks. Thanks again for having me on High Noon. And
guys, you got to go, Jeffrey, you've got to go to Cali Chronic Comics on Facebook or Instagram and pick up some of his 420 merchandise. He's got rolling papers, comic books that are also coloring books that have storylines in them and jokes. It's the best.
Yeah.
What else?
And,
T-shirts? Do you have T-shirts?
I do. I have apparel. I have all kinds of stuff. And feel free to just Instagram DM me and place an order or just inquire about it. And I'd love to talk to anybody. So thanks. We'll see you next week on High Noon.
Thank you so much,
Zoom.
Jeffrey.
Comic Spot. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of this show and making it even better. And I love that you're coming on every week and enlightening people, because there's so much that's on TV and movies that's part of our history that young people or even old people like me don't know. Right. And you're helping us. Right.
And it is important. And if you notice, I'm sort of a historian in this department. And so anybody who has questions about shows or stuff, hit me up,
Maybe sometime you can help people to understand all the history of all the comics, the different genres, and who we come up on stage or we go and watch comedy and we don't know all of who's come before us.
We don't, and we don't know, what everybody's story is. Everybody, and there's as we've found out, there's a lot of pain in comedy. A lot of people are, this is well, the reason why we do it is we're sad clowns, and we're trying to relate to somebody that can feel our pain. So, there we go. And
Exactly.
I get a lot out of doing this show, so thank you very much. And sincerely, these sitcoms I mentioned, they're therapeutic to me. I watch them, and I feel good. Everyone complains that there's a bunch of crap on TV. Well, find the good stuff. Find the good stuff, and
Exactly.
yeah. So
Thank you so much, Jeffrey Peterson, the 420 comic, Cali Chronic Comics on Facebook and Instagram. Pick up his stuff and buy it and enjoy your life a little bit more. Thank you,
okay, we'll see you
Jeffrey.
next week.
You got it. I'll be here. Thanks for your friendship, too.
You got it.
Bye.
Bye bye now.